Buongiorno.
Hello, Antonella. Good morning, everybody. I think we'll make a start. I'll admit anybody else who comes in later. You'll have noticed that I've started recording the meeting so that we can upload this to our SharePoint later and share it with anybody who hasn't managed to make it today. If you've got any questions during the meeting, if you want to put them in the chat, and I'm sure Alice will get to those later as she goes through. Other than that, over to you, Alice.
Hello, everyone. So it's also nice to be here and to get to talk with you a little bit about Historiana. I don't know if I'm the only one, but I hear my voice coming back to me. Yeah, so I would like to ask you if it's possible to just mute yourself and when we start having a discussion to unmute yourselves to take the floor. Thank you very, very much. My name is Alice Modena, or Alice. I am Professional Development Coordinator at Euroclio, which is the European Association of History Educators. And I'm here today to talk with you about Historiana, and specifically about how Historiana can be a valuable tool for teachers to both as a source repository, but also as a tool to create your own educational resources using digital tools. Before I start showing you Historiana, I want to tell you a little bit more about me and maybe also to get to know you a little bit more. I'll start with myself. As I said, my name is Alice. I studied, well, I was born and raised in Italy, where I went to high school. And when I was at high school, I used to hate history. Just vehemently, I used to hate my history classes. And one of the reasons why I used to hate my history classes is that my teachers approached history teaching just by just by asking us to read the book, learn the dates, learn the main people that were involved in the historical events, and that was about it when it came to learning history. So it's quite surprising that now, or I am quite surprised often that now I am at the European Association of History Educators, working on developing the educational material for history students, especially for history high school students, and training programs for teachers, for practicing teachers and teacher trainers on how to apply new engaging teaching strategies and make history lessons a little bit less boring and a little bit more impactful. And yeah, I'm very, very happy for being here with you today. I would like to thank Valentina for inviting me. And yeah, I would like to get started. So we look at the moment like a manageable group of participants. And before jumping into Historiana and what is Historiana and what can Historiana do, I would like to ask you a couple of questions. I have created a Padlet to be able to collect the answers to these questions. I'm going to copy the link to the Padlet to the clipboard and add the link into the chat. I'm going to keep the Padlet open for the duration of the session. I'm actually going to keep the Padlet open for the whole day, so that if you would like to contribute to the Padlet in another moment or to share the Padlet with your colleagues that couldn't join us here today, this would also be possible. But what I would like to do now, I would just like to ask you 4 main questions. I would like to ask you, how do you normally develop your lessons or your classroom activities? And then what process do or did you follow to design your online classroom activities? This is mostly because I'm just very, very curious about lesson development process across Europe. And then I would like to know if you have any practical tips or tricks to design activities, both online or face-to-face, and if there's any challenge that you still face. I would like to collect these answers so that I can tailor a little bit more my presentation, but also because I really think that maybe some of your colleagues here with us today have the tip or the trick that can help you solve your challenges. The Padlet is open, so feel free to type into the Padlet. I see an anonymous ant already typing into the Padlet, but I would also like to invite you to just raise your hand and take the floor to let us know a little bit more about your teaching experience now. I am very, very bad at spelling, but I see Helene van den Houten.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, if I understand your question correctly, you just want to know something about my teaching experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I don't teach history. I teach languages, English and German. But in it, there is also quite a large part on history, because I teach the senior students. And for instance, we look at the history of the United States, how it came to be and how it became independent and so on. And in German, we look, of course, at the history from the 1930s up to 1990s in Germany, the development. In that, I work with a course that we make ourselves together with some colleagues. And what we try to do, because it's English, we have to put in all the skills. So speaking, listening, reading, writing. And we always try to make a connection from the past to today. For instance, if you look at the history of the United States and you look at the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment is the right to own a gun. And then we look at gun ownership today, for instance, and the problems with school shootings. So I always try to make a connection. If we talk about the Native Americans, we look at the past and what happened to them in the past. And then we look at the situation today, and I use a TED Talk for that, for instance. So that's how we try to teach it. It's rather, we always give a historic background, a framework, and then we try to connect it to their world. So it doesn't stay in the air, kind of, for them.
Yeah, so that they feel it a little bit closer to their own experiences.
Yeah, we talked about, last year we talked about George Floyd, or we talked about the elections. But then we always try to connect it to a historical point of view. Where does this come from, this difference between the political parties, or how can you connect it to the independence of the United States, and things like that.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much for sharing. And yeah, it's great to meet you.
Same to you.
Okay. Anyone else who would like to share your own teaching experience so far? Antonella. Hi, nice to meet you again.
Hi, nice to meet you again. I have taught this year at the 4th and 5th year of the university degree in tourism at the University of Pisa. And even if my course was a part of a larger course, so the experience is not a full course, but we have found very interesting to interact with digital archives in support to tourism promotion. And I am receiving just in these days the work done by the students in the light of the exam that will be next week. And they have found very nice ways to interact with these archives. In particular, the Euroclio gallery builder is so easy to use and so stimulating new ideas, and they developed new ways to promote tourism together with the culture. So my experience is that participation is very important, and as much as we give to the students the possibility to participate in the course at the different levels, clearly, of the education. So the participation for students at the end of their university degree could be more intense than in primary or secondary or medium school. But participation is a key, and I have found that there is a kind of a resistance from my colleagues, professors, because even if at the end of the university, I was surprised that at the end of the university, when we are dealing with adults who are going to be soon in the society by themselves, there is a kind of attitude that the professors should inform, should ingest knowledge into the students, while in my opinion, in particular in the contemporary society, the role of the professor is more Socratic. We have to extract from the students their knowledge, and so I think that this has much to do with education, the relationship between professors, teachers, and students, because it is not completed, the process. We assume that everybody is in a new style of teaching, but it is not true. And I must say that with my experience of a grandmother, I have a 10 years grandchild, and I spend all the weekend with him. Still, we have the medium school, still in the medium school, the attitude is old style, similarly to what I experienced 60 years ago. So I think that this has a lot to do with the teaching and the use of the new technologies and the effective impact of education on the new generations.
Thank you, Antonella. If I've seen correctly, we are going to have Gloria and then Ria. So Gloria.
Thank you so much for letting me speak, and I'm sorry if there is a bit of noise behind me. And I am happy to respond right after Professor Freza, which I really thank for a comment, because that's actually what my experience is quite close to. I am now a research master's student in Groningen University, and I'm studying sustainable management of cultural heritage, and I'm being an assistant professor. So that's my experience with teaching, connected with the previous experience and continuous experience with, well, a different type of teaching, which is peer-to-peer teaching in terms of, in the framework of the European Youth Parliament. And I agree with Professor Freza in terms of how much we should take step forward into creating a system of education that is more based on contribution from the student that is then collected and framed by the professor, rather than something that comes from top down. And I feel that tools such as Historiana and Euroclio can play such an incredible role in fostering this novelty.
Thank you. And Ria?
Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Ria Christens. I'm not a teacher, but I think there are some colleagues from the Heritage Service or participating too. So I think it's maybe interesting to give our experience from the other side of the field. So
Always.
I believe indeed very much in the fact that we have to give ownership to the students and the teachers, as Antonella already mentioned. Our heritage service, because I'm responsible for a heritage service on a large school campus, is really aiming to do so. We are students and teachers are welcome on the floor in the archives to become researchers themselves. But what do we notice more and more? And during COVID, it became more clear even that researchers, teachers, students don't come to the archives physically. So they are expecting different service from us in a digital way. And in a very basic manner, we try to provide our archives in a digital way to make the bridge directly. And we do it, I have to confess, in a very basic manner by making folders on a Teams platforms. Very there is a question, there is a topic a class wants to work on, so we try to provide folders out of our archives, which could be interesting for them to work on. But it remains basic, so other tools would be welcome. That's one experience I have. Another constatation or experience is it's very hard working for us too. So it's easier said than done sometimes.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I agree. It's the digital requires more engagement also on the part of who prepares the activity. I was hoping this would also, come up. Anyone else who would like to take the floor? I've seen a couple of comments in the Padlet. Most of them I typed while you were speaking so that we can keep track of it. I understood that there's going to be people at home viewing the recording and we will be able to share the Padlet with them. But someone added also that it is challenging to involve students actively in online classes because interaction is more difficult to achieve. And then someone added as a challenge also, the role of the educational system. And they said that one of the problems to change how teachers teach is determined by the educational systems in each country. And then I imagine they are Belgian, because then they go on saying the Belgian system, for instance, doesn't always facilitate more innovative ways, such as co-teaching or modular school programs. So thank you very, very much for sharing this. Jochen?
Yes, hello. Thanks for this event. I have more a question than a comment, because I try to engage in a new holistic medical or health research. I'm a medical historian, and I engage in some projects who try to bring into museums and courses holistic medicine, and which is quite difficult because the digitalization in medicine is quite focused on data collections. So my question is a little bit, because in Europe, I observe exhibitions who are open for holistic things, and most of them do it with cosmologies. I like John Trash from London. He does his cosmographics, or Yukui, he calls it cosmotechnologies. So my question is a bit, is it possible, because I want to address adults and kids and young people, is it possible to convey such holistic cosmological aspects? Because I observe more attendance of more and more natural sciences. Thank you.
So if I had to summarize this, maybe the challenge in this case is, some topics lend themselves to digitization more than others, or are seen as more digitizable than others?
Yeah, it's a little bit more this, I think I see a bias between natural sciences, logic, and then let's call it aesthetics. Aesthetics, cosmologies, so old knowledge traditions, old wisdom traditions, which are also in Europe. And I observe that just some museums are open for these cosmologies. I call it like media studies. So I think it's a pity that it's not going more down at the age to young people at schools and just something for experts. And all this climate change people, they are very natural scientific, and I think it's too narrow. So I look for engaged people who keep on this holistic perspective, but I don't know whether there are communities like Europeana, Historiana. Also there, it's quite rare.
Thank you. Anyone who would like to reply to Jochen or to share your own teaching experience before I start sharing Historiana with you? Jochen came in asking the difficult questions.
Exactly. Sorry, but thanks.
It's okay. Antonella.
Well, I think that Johan is right. The use of Europeana is still too much limited if compared with other resources. So there is an enormous distance between how we use Google, Wikipedia, and how we use Google Europeana. And this difference, in my opinion, is due to two factors. One is the enormous amount of investment that has been put from private investors and from the community in Google and Wikipedia. And these are, and YouTube, these are the most used resources also on the internet. So private investment that does not exist in Europeana, apart very limited experiences. And the second is that the amount of information that is available on Google, Wikipedia, YouTube is enormously bigger, larger than in Europeana. It is true that in Europeana everything is controlled, safe. There are a lot of efforts to make it high quality, not always reached, but this is human. But the problem is that if we are used in our contemporary society to be submerged by information, how can Europeana emerge from this normal experience? And this is a discussion that has not yet taken place. In my opinion, Europeana should evolve towards the trend of the society. It is unsustainable to fight against somebody who is too much bigger than us. David against Goliath is a biblical experience. It's unfortunately not in our society. So Europeana should be able to open new channels in order to put inside Europeana more content from the community, to get the community involved. This happened with Wikipedia. Why it cannot happen with Europeana? While I do not trust that the private investment, business investment in Europeana will change the history. This is just my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Maybe this is also a good moment to underline that I do not work at Europeana, and I do not have any power on Europeana. I work at the European Association of History Educators, which has developed Historiana, which is closely connected to Europeana, but not the same entity. We are closely connected, as in Historiana, which I am now going to show you, works with Europeana sources, not exclusively, but largely with Europeana sources. But yeah, it is a separate entity.
But just
Yeah.
to clarify, that I'm not asking you to,
Yeah.
to change Europeana.
Also,
It is
yeah.
just an experience of a user and a contributor to Europeana, as I guess everybody of us is doing.
Exactly. Also, yeah, even if I worked European, I'm not sure I would have that power. So there's that as well. So what am I here to show to you today? Thank you so much to everyone who has been typing into the Padlet. I've seen a little bit more content coming in, and who has taken the floor to talk. The Padlet will remain open, so feel free to adding content on the Padlet. I will now share my screen. There, this is the screen that I want to share. Apologies if I am now looking on the side, but I'm working with two screens. So what is Historiana? Very, very broadly defined, Historiana is an e-learning platform that collects content and educational resources that Euroclio and especially the teachers that are working with Euroclio have been developing in the past almost 10 years. Historiana is an initiative that we started in 2013. You know, I'm a history educator, so I'm going to start with the history of Historiana. It's an initiative that started in 2013 with the idea of creating a different kind of textbook. It started as something arranged around themes. So what we originally did was we identified these 7 themes and decided to try and develop collections of sources or educational activities. Would I be able to open? Yes. Or educational activities that can be used to tackle these themes. And then we noticed that this was not enough. And so what we did was we decided to expand Historiana to host sources that teachers could use to develop their own lessons, to host learning activities, and to host e-learning activities. I would like to talk with you about the e-learning activities, and particularly I would like to play a little bit together with 2 e-learning activities. But before we get into that, I just want to super quickly to show you everything that is available on Historiana. Historiana contains historical content, which you can use to develop their own activities. It's mostly arranged around source collections. Many of these source collections, as you might notice, are created with Europeana sources. All the source collections, so let me open this one, my favorite, The Age of Synergies. All the source collections present visual sources with a short description, source information. All the sources that are presented in the source collections are copyright cleared, so can be used in an educational context and can be shared. This will need to be turned. I'm going to make a note for that. In the historical content, you will be able to find also units. So we have created source collections and lesson material on specific topics, such as censorship. And in the unit, you will be able to find lesson plans or collection of visual sources. Or you can find key moments, which are basically units, but revolving around key moments in history. And finally, you can find viewpoints. Viewpoints can be used to show students how opinions on a topic are not completely, you know, it's not only black or white, but there's a scale of, yeah, there's a gradient of opinions. We have several viewpoints about contested historical events, about contested histories. We have one on borders and self-determination and on the case of Crimea, which will probably need to be updated. We have several on of migration movements, or for example, we have one on leaders in times of turmoil. So on the leadership of Kader in Hungary, Huzak in Czechoslovakia, and Jaruzelski in Poland, where you can find viewpoints, so memories of individuals or extracts of books about how it was to live in Hungary in this case at the time. Another section of Historiana is dedicated to teaching and learning, and in this section you can find lesson plans on a variety of themes that you can open and then download for classroom use. So I will show you World War II recruitment posters. In this activity, oh, Benny should be here or arriving here. In this activity, as you can see, you can find downloadable lesson plans and lesson introductions. So this is the lesson plan. It says step by step how to carry out the activity. Lesson introduction is some additional material for the teacher. And then worksheets for students to fill in when they carry out the activity. All of this is copyright cleared as well, so you can download it and you can use it in your classroom. And it is available both as a PDF and a Word file, so that you will also be able to adapt it to your classroom context. It's CC BY 4.0. And finally, we have the possibility to create your own e-learning activities. We have several e-learning activities that we have created ourselves, that you can take and share with your students. But we have also developed an e-activity builder that can be used to create your own e-learning activities that you can then share with your students, either as homeworks or as activities to do inside the classroom. Historiana will, starting on the 11th of March, I believe, be available also with a version for tablets and smartphones. So you will have the possibility to do it in the classroom or to ask your students to carry out the activity at home. The e-activity builder is fairly intuitive to use. You can just drag the building blocks that you would like to use, move them in the order that you would like to see, and use these blocks to ask your students to carry out specific activities. I am going to show you two examples of e-learning activities. But before I start, I wanted to ask you there. Let me just have a quick check in the chat. Okay. Before I start showing you existing activities, I wanted to very, very briefly tell you more about each of the building blocks. So we have a block for text, where you can just add a short description of what the activity is going to be about, or a short description of what is the task that students will have to carry out. We have a block for questions. Here you can type your question, and your student will have the possibility to type their answers in here. We have a block to embed external links. We mostly use it to embed YouTube links, so short YouTube videos, but this block allows you to embed any page that can create an embed code. So for example, I can embed our Padlet by getting the embed code and adding it in here. And then instructions for educators, and this is what the students would see. And they would also have the possibility to add and engage with it, for example. The sorting block will allow you to, please, sources, to ask your students to sort images on the page, and you will have the possibility to choose which background you would like your students to use. So for example, you could ask students to put on the left all the images about religious traditions, and on the right are the images that are not about religious tradition. The visual analysis block will allow you to ask your students to analyze a source by adding annotations. So I don't know, flowers. Creativity is not my strongest suit, so there you go. The highlight block will allow you to ask your students to here you would put some text and a title, and the student would be able to highlight the text and add comment on the reasons why they have highlighted the text. The comparing tool allow you to ask your students to compare two sources, such as these two propaganda posters, and your students will have the possibility to compare the slogans, for example. And finally, you have the possibility to create mind maps. These I can't really show live just because it requires several steps, but basically you have the possibility to add a series of sources, such as the rail, power, I don't know, very random amount of sources, and then to place them on the map and to create meaningful connections between them. And what the student will see is they will have a starting point and then be able to discover all the connections and reading the description of the source. And finally, you will have the possibility to interact with your students by giving them the instructions that you can see. None of this makes much sense until I show you an existing activity as opposed to just me typing on the screen. Before I show you the activities, I have seen a question in the chat, which is a question from Jochen, who asks, are the tools on the Historiana homepage also good for preparing exhibitions? Do you mean these tools, or do you mean the sources on the source collection part, Jochen?
No, maybe really the first step to design it, because I'm already in contact with some museums to convince them to bring in these medical topics. So it would be enough the first steps to show them material I have and to convince them to support certain ideas. More about planning.
Oh, okay. There is a possibility for entities that are not Euroclio to add their own sources, so to make source collections. For example, this is a very good segue. The Photo Consortium has some source collections on Historiana, and we call them partners. So every partner of Historiana has the possibility to create their own source collections and to create their own e-learning activities, both based on their source collections or based on other sources that are available of Historiana if they would like to. So I think these might be maybe a tool that you can show.
And I can add my own resources also.
Yes, you can also add your own resources. I'm going to show you first that part, actually, and then I'm going to show you two activities. To add your own sources, you will need to be registered on Historiana. Registering on Historiana is free of charge. I'm just gonna enter with my personal account because it's a little bit less crowded than the admin account. And then what you can do is you can either go on source collections, open a source collection and select sources to add to your My Historiana by clicking on the small plus down there. Or if you go on My Historiana and on sources, you can upload your own sources by dragging them from your computer and dropping them in here. Once you upload your source, you have the possibility to add a title and a short description to all of your sources. On your My Historiana, you can also add e-learning activities. So, for example, this is the activity that I'm going to show you now. So you can add it to your My Historiana. and then it will show up in here. And once you add them, you have the possibility to change them. So if you want to change sources or change the language, or add a little bit more scaffolding, because maybe you would like to use the activity in English, but English is not the primary language of your students, this is a possibility that you have here. You get the activity ready to use, but you can make any change that you would like. Or you can, of course, create your own learning activities and save them on your My Historiana. Activities can also be shared with students. I'm going to keep that open because that's what I'm going to show you. Just by share, you can either share the activity with other educators and they will receive a link that will allow them to change the activity themselves, or with your students. And your students will receive a link that allows them to see the activity only in student mode. When you share your activity with students, you can create a tag. So let's say that I want to share it with you. So this is the year 2021, 2022, and I'm just going to call it I2. You get a unique shareable link, which I am now going to paste in the chat. And the student opening the activity will see this. So we'll put their email address in here. Email addresses are not stored nor shared, but the email address is what you can use then to provide feedback to your students, for example. And then students will carry out the activity. And at the end, when they are done with the activity, we'll have the possibility to send the activity to the teacher as a teacher or as an educator, because of course this can be used also by museum personnel or by teacher trainers. You will have the possibility to see who you've shared it with here, and to see who is working on it, and to review the answer. Well, I mean, I can't review any answer now because it wasn't submitted, but to review the answers as well. What I would like to do now is I would like to play around with Historiana a little bit with you. And I would like to show you two different e-learning activities that have been developed to achieve two different results. And then I would like to share with you the link to both the activities as a teacher, so that if you want, you can start getting familiar a little bit with the building blocks. So the first activity that I would like to share with you is this one, is the How Does Coffee Reveal the Contradictions of the European Values activity. I am going to put in the chat the link. Actually, let me just copy the whole text. I am going to put in the chat the link to the activity on Teacher's View. This is what the activity carries out. I'm going to show it with the student's view. This activity has been developed by Helen Nelson, who's a member of the Historiana teaching and learning team, to talk about the history of coffee and coffee consumption, and use this fairly familiar topic to most students, because most students would have seen, you know, a coffee cup, an espresso cup in their life, to prompt reflection on how did coffee change life. How did the arrival of coffee change life on the European continent, but also to have them reflect on what are the contradictions inherent in coffee. So it starts with a short piece of text that allows to get context. So it says coffee arrived in Europe from the lands of the Ottomans in the 1600s. Coffee houses sprang up in cities around Europe. They were very fashionable. People could meet in there, and they met in there to talk about ideas, trade, the world, politics, and to network. And the first activity is to analyze this image, which is owned by the Rijksmuseum and is called the Patriots Coffee House. And it will be just to check the annotations that the teacher has already made to learn more of how coffee houses were a place to meet and to discuss. And so the student will have the possibility at their own pace to just view how coffee houses were anonymous, but also they were in urban areas with a lot of people coming and going, and this is shown by, you know, we have soldiers, but we also have other members of society here. there were people from different occupations that met and talked, and ideas were discussed. And you could also have private talks. So this helps setting a little bit the scene for students to understand how coffee houses changed, the way people met, and that conversation. Then there is a short text about Voltaire, which is used to bring in specific concepts. So the teacher themselves added highlight. Students can add highlights if they want, but this is not the task. Here, the task is just to read the text and then discover the term revolutionaries and the analysis of this text from the teacher. Then there's a short clip, which I will not open, but it's a very, very interesting short video. I would recommend that you look at that. And then there's a small part about enlightenment. So it says, you know, these are some of the ideals that were spread by enlightenment. So the rights of the man and the citizen, freedom to worship, the right to vote, the right to a free and fair trial, the idea that all men were born equal. And it asks students to rephrase with their own word how what they understood were the beliefs of European people, so the values of European people at the time. And then it says, but let's check, were they actually practicing what they were preaching? Here you can see Indian workers, and there's a short text for students to learn to read and understand. This text was added by the teacher, but if you want, here you can also add extracts from newspaper articles, for example. All links that you copy paste will be retained, and you will have the possibility to change how the text looks like as well. So to add quotations or bullet points and so on. And so then there's a question that says, hey, student, now reflect. In page, what is it? 6, you told me how did European people believe the world should be? And then in page 8, you learned about the harvest of coffee. So what are the contradictions that you can see in here? And finally, there's a question about students' own identities. So coffee shops are everywhere. What are your own values? And so on and so forth. And once the student finishes the activity, they can send it over. So this activity has been developed to connect the past with the present in a way that students can relate with, can relate to, and to help students start reflecting about their own values and their own consumer attitudes. This activity has been developed for fairly older students. So this is the first activity that I wanted to show you. The second activity that I wanted to show you is an activity that has been developed using photo consortium materials. I have added it to my Historiana as well. This is the activity. Let me just share it with all of you before I start playing with it. So this is the activity on gender roles in Western Europe with the teacher's view. Yeah, voila. So this is the activity on gender roles in Western Europe. It has been developed to ask students to work with some photos from the 1950s to get a sense of what life in the 1950s was like. As you can see, it's fairly short. It's much shorter than the other activity. If you want, you can create an e-learning activity with just one source, asking students to analyze that source, for example, or with just one activity. This is what the activity looks like in this case. So first, students, I'm going to show it to you with students. So first, students are shown as a variety of photos taken in Girona in Europe in the 50s, and they are asked to sort them in photos that show a clear distinction between gender roles in the public sphere, between photos that do not show a clear distinction between gender roles in the public sphere, and any photo that they are undecided about, they can just keep in the center of the screen. they can click on every photo to see it a little bit bigger. And there were no information about the source added at the moment, but of course, every teacher can add their own description. So we have photos, and we have the possibility to move photos. I'm not going to do the activity at the moment, but so students will have the possibility to sort their images, and then they are asked to choose a particular photo that's from the exercise before that interests them, and ask them to infer. And then there's an explanation for students that have a bit more trouble with English language, so to learn from the activity something about gender roles in public spaces, and then to ask if they have any question about it, like if there's any question that this is raising for them. And then they're asked to do the same activity with the same photos, but to sort them in a different way. So what are the photos that have something to do with work, with religion, with cars, or with leisure? Cars. There. This is, I believe, religion. This is, I have no idea. I'm going to say leisure. So the student would carry out this activity, and then it would, the student would be asked, did you notice any connection between the gender roles and the labels that we have used? So are there more photos of women under the label religion as opposed to the label car, for example? And finally, this activity actually asks students to go out there and learn more in their own context. So it says, hey, so this activity suggests certain things about gender roles. This is what we have learned. How can you find out more? So why don't you go to talk to all the relatives or friends about their memories? Or why don't you search something about the place you live in? Which is very, very important, because all these activities were, all these photos were taken in Girona. But of course, this activity can be used with students from all over the place. So it's important to create a connection between the sources and the and students' personal experiences or students' own context, as Helene was saying at the very, very beginning of the lesson, of the workshop that we are doing now. So as you can see, a very different activity that asks students to engage with the sources and to infer knowledge and understanding about a historical period from the sources. There are many more e-learning activities that I have seen developed. I wanted, to address Jochen's comment that that's a good example of how anti-colonialism and anti-racism are dominating the discourse. That's one of the sources that we have chosen to use. There's actually several e-learning activities. Most of them are about everyday life in a specific area. We actually do also have a couple of source collections or activities on continuity and change in medicine, or on the rise and fall of medieval universities. It's a bit of a mixed bag of activities, because teachers have different needs across Europe, and we try to address them a little bit everywhere. I am going to stop sharing my screen so that I can actually see you again. Great. I would, what I planned of doing in the last part of this workshop was I wanted to give you a little bit of time to play around with the e-activity builder. You're all practicing educators, so you will also all have different needs that I hope the activity builder can fill for them. So I wanted to give you, a little bit of time to ask me any questions that you might have, but also, get familiar with the builder. At the same time, I'm aware that being on your computer doing activities while there's an active session, it's a little bit, can create a little bit of discomfort for some of the participants. So I also wanted to ask you, how would you like to proceed? As I see it, we have 3 options. One is we take a 10 minutes break, and during the 10 minutes break, you can play with the activity builder and note down any practical question that you have. Or we can jump right into a discussion of how would you adapt the two activities that we have developed in the classroom and any other questions that you might have. Microsoft Teams gives us reaction buttons. So I would like to ask all of you who would like to have a 10 minutes break to play around with the activity builder to use the thumbs up reaction. And all of you who would like to stay in the group and just start already with a discussion of how would we use it in our context to reply with the applause reaction. So far I've seen one applause and one thumbs up. You find the reaction buttons at the top right hand side of the screen next to the comments section. Okay. There seems to be a majority of people who would like to already engage in a conversation about how does the how would you use the two activities that I've shown or any other activities that you can find on Historiana in your own context, and about any questions or comments that you might have. So yeah, any thoughts? Anyone who wants to break the ice for us? Helene.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
I thought it was very interesting what you presented. If I look at our system, I can see some difficulties, for instance, with the first topic on the coffee, because they're very specific topics. And our teachers, as far as I know the history content, often have to cover 100 years in like 5 lessons.
Yeah.
So this results often in a rather looking more at chronology and looking at how one element influences another element. And it was a little bit present in the coffee, but I think lesson plans like that, my teachers won't use it because it's too specific. If they focus on this, then they cannot deal with all the other content, so to say.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a bit more in the second one with the gender roles, but there then I was lacking a little bit of depth.
Yeah.
In the activity, and how you can do this. You can do this with several students, of course, but this would only take 10 minutes of one class, for instance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I agree absolutely. The activity on coffee is very, very specific. Maybe some activity that would have been more more in line with what teachers might need are, we have activities about power relations in the Nazi regime or about the Spanish Civil War, for example. What I personally like of the e-learning activities is that this is something that you could also ask your students to do before you jump into a topic. So I'm looking now, like on my screen now, I have an activity that's called How Did the Life Condition of Enslaved People and Their Descendants Change Between 1792 and 1880? And this activity, for example, could be done by students at the end of a module about human rights movements in the 1880s. Which might help. And maybe also the activity about about gender roles in the 50s is something that can be done by students to get an idea of what was life in the period. We are actually now working on a project where we will create activities that we want to be short so that teachers can do them at the beginning, at the end, or in the middle of a lesson. But yeah, no, I agree that I think that's the beauty of having multiple e-learning activities. I'm gonna put in the chat a link to the teaching and learning environment. And there you can see both learning activities and e-learning activities on the vast majority of themes. So thank you for your comment. And Ria?
Yes, let us say I'm really convinced. Why? Because the tools that you presented, you do not present a digital translation of an existing physical learning activity, but in fact you create something new. The result is really an upgrading, a new digital learning activity. You create other possibilities, as you mentioned yourself. You can use it before or after class and make it all more effective, the learning activity. So it's more than a tool even.
Thank you. And would you do you see yourself using one of these activities? Would you need to change it for your audiences?
I would like to use it, yes, in very close contact with the teachers and in what they need from us. And it really creates a possibility to go in interaction and to introduce material of us, materials, which can very often be very small and local examples, but really very good rooted examples. And by connecting it with other material on Historiana, you create a larger context, and you make it a more general, connected to more general topic. And yeah, I think that would be really interesting.
Thank you.
Yes.
There was a question in the chat about if we know who uses them, and if you have any tests done and any feedback received. We do. We have we are currently creating a dashboard that will allow us to keep track of this without having to go and ask teachers, hey, did you use it and can you tell us? The dashboard will be ready by the end of August. But so far, we do piloting for every activity that we upload on the tool, on the platform, both for every learning activity and for every e-learning activity. And we try to pilot them with students of different ages so that we can really learn more about how the activity performs with students of different ages. We do have, there's a team that is doing user research about it. So if you want to try them out and then let us know how it goes, I'm always very, very happy to learn more about how it fares in a classroom. Is there any other question or comment or thought about how you would use it or would not use it? I do not want to set this up as a feedback session on Historiana. I want to use the remaining of the time really to talk about challenges or processes or activity development processes that you encounter or that you carry out. So I would really like for the last part of the session to be about sharing our experiences, and if Historiana can help us improve or change how we approach digital learning specifically. I'm very happy about it, but yeah, I would really like to know about your thoughts and your experiences, or about anything that is missing on Historiana. If you've ever, played with it, we are about to embark on this massive undertaking of finding white spots on Historiana and developing content to fill these white spots. So this is also something that I'm always very interested about. What activities do you think we should provide sources for? For example, what historical period do you want more about the age of exploration? Helene.
Yeah, sorry. Just
Oh, no
one
problem.
last comment. I think if I look at the future here, it would be interesting to see, because now you often work with pictures and so on, which is good with the visual content, but connect that to digital tools. You already work with the Padlet. We see a huge increase in digitalization in education due to, of course, the COVID crisis. People are starting to use it more and more, and it's not always easy. So if you can support them in that, if you tell them you can do this with this digital tool or this digital, and we worked with this, for instance, now I thought with the Padlet it was very interesting and very quick and not difficult. So maybe if you connect that into the Historiana, it would also provide interesting elements.
Absolutely.
Ria has a question.
Yeah, I saw it. It's educational heritage represented. What do you mean with educational heritage, Ria?
Let's say all kinds of school heritage, photographs, and as a source.
So like the history of schools?
For instance.
I am not sure. Education, let me see. No. Very good. Thank you.
It could be a nice example. And if so, we could promote Historiana on our Flemish, where there is a Flemish platform on educational heritage, which is Slim Erfgoed. And that could be, we could use that example then on Historiana to promote your platform.
That would be
more in general.
Yeah, no, the history of school, education heritage is actually quite interesting. We have one source collection about Bologna and the rise of medieval universities, which is, it guides with visual sources, it guides students toward understanding why universities, as we know them now, were created when they were created. So it talks about urbanization and the creation of new professions and the need to store and share knowledge and so on. But there's nothing about like middle grade school and high school. We have something about higher education only. There's also a couple of e-learning activities. Valentina says that we can surely add your photo collection that you're currently preparing as a source. Oh yeah, which reminds me, Valentina, while you type, this is the source collection on Bologna that I was mentioning. Where do you find the partner pages? Because the Photo Consortium has a partner page. As of today, you find them here in partners, and you find several partner pages. We have partnership with, well, Euroclio, with the Royal Library here in the Netherlands, with the Institute for the Study of Totalitarian Regimes. Unfortunately, the source collection of the Institute are in Czech, but they're very, very nice. With the Museum of Slavonia, with Stockholm Skolan, and with the Photo Consortium. We have more partners, like more partnerships in the works, but these are the partners that we have at the moment. And for Bologna, we also have here Bologna. Never mind. Oh yeah, of course. we have a e-learning activity that I still have to publish. But yeah. Great. Antonella.
Just a small comment. I think that it would be interesting and maybe useful to have a mechanism for users of Historiana to leave their comments on the experience of using Historiana in their teaching activities, because it's a new instrument and a conversation among teachers and students as well could help to improve the use of Historiana in actual teaching.
So something like a Historiana community. Yeah. This is also definitely something that we can work on. I mean, I'm no web developer, but I think they can work on it. Great. Okay. Last round for questions or comments. Going once. Going twice. Okay. Valentina, I have a question for you. Did I understand correctly that the sessions are back to back? So there's another session starting at 11:30.
Yes, in fact, in the program, that would be what's written. But I would like to ask Ian what he thinks, if perhaps it is good to give a little breath to the participants in between.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I planned actually for 1 hour and 15, so that it would be 15 minutes to, you know, brew some fresh coffee and walk around the desk.
Yeah, that indeed there is no this small flexibility in case the discussion was prolonged, but maybe
yes,
we can.
I agree, Valentina. Yeah, I was just watching the time and I was going to wait till it ticked round to at 10 or 11:15 in European time, and then just say, you know, can we start and close things down? Yeah. So I think it's a natural end is perfect timing, really, doesn't it? It allows everybody to just nip to the bathroom or get a cup of coffee. Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. Great. Well, then, thank you so much for having me. I'm gonna put my email address in the chat if I find my mouse back. There. It's very easy. It's alice@euroclio.eu. I normally say Alice like Alice in Wonderland when I make reservations because it's much easier for people to get my name right. If you have any questions, any comments, if you work at cultural heritage institutes that would like to put material on Historiana, if you would like to test new features, if you would like to, what else are we doing at the moment? We have a webinar series on Historiana going on. We had a session last week. Next session is on the 22nd of March. And we are about to open a recruitment phase to have new content providers for Historiana as well. So stay tuned for all of that. Please do drop me an email. It was very, very nice meeting you all. And thank you for having me today. And have a great rest of your sessions.